You've just entered the Disaster Tough podcast, the place for emergency managers, first responders, and humanitarians who want to get the job done. Stories, lessons, and tips are provided by field experts. I'm your host, John Scardina, owner of Doberman Emergency Management and former federal emergency response official who's responded to some of the most extreme disasters. Disaster Tough is our mantra. It combines experience, training, and analytics in order to be successful at any stage within the disaster lifecycle. It means being a professional in emergency and disaster services. Doberman Emergency Management lives by this. If your organization needs to fill a gap, please contact us. We can help. Contact info is in the show notes. We also support other products and organizations that will increase your ability. For example, if you fight wildfires, hurricanes, a pandemic, any disaster in the field, at a hospital or command center, listen up. You're missing out if you do not use L3 Harris for your radio comms. They are secure, portable, mobile, and scalable, which is great news for us in the field. A truly disaster-tough radio system. Check out the XL family of radios by clicking on the show notes or simply go to l3harris.com. When you think of situational awareness, you need to think of Futurity IT. They are disaster tough because they saw a gap and figured out how to close it by creating the Orion and Athena applications. Situational awareness is all about speed, coordination, and accuracy of information. Futurity IT's Orion app collects and provides preliminary damage assessments and integrates all incident action plan documents with WebEOC. The Athena app allows for planning, contact tracing, and customizable group coordination in every single phase of the disaster lifecycle. The best part? Futurity IT made both applications extremely intuitive. It's so easy to use. Click on the show notes today to schedule a free demo.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. I'm so excited for this week's episode. We're going to be talking to my good friend, Caitlyn Von Stein. She is awesome. She has so much field experience. In fact, I met her several years ago in a couple different deployments, actually. And so I've been able to leverage her experience. She's an analyst at FEMA. She's one of those people that, a funny story before we have her introduced on here. Every time I met people from headquarters was like, oh no, like another headquarters person came out here and here we go. But when she landed in the field, man, she was just like an all-star. And so like she has done so well in her field to make sure that she's able to provide like the best intelligence possible for those in the field as well as at the headquarters. So it's a real pleasure to have her on the show. Caitlyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wow, that might be the best introduction I think I've ever received. So no, I really appreciate it, and I'm definitely excited to be here. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so it's great to sort of spread the word on emergency management and give my input and my experiences, and so just the opportunity is great. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you say that it might be the best introduction, but people say a lot of good things about you behind your back. You're one of those people that's like, oh, Caitlyn's there, like, you know, everything's going to work out. And so I was actually trying to think, was it Oroville Dam or was it the Southern California wildfires that we met?
We might brief. I did not deploy to the dam.
Okay. So it's the wildfires.
Ever in the response center, but definitely at the wildfires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So big shout out
we were great buds. We went hiking and everything. Yeah.
We lived the dream.
That was our bonding time.
Oh my gosh. Hey, you got to bond with the people you work with, right? So that's funny. We had several people there. I think Kyle Gagne was with us on that hike too.
Yeah, that sounds right. Mm-hmm.
He needs to come on the show sometime. For those who don't know who he is, he was the situational awareness unit leader on the IMAT West, and then he took over my job when I left, so he now does GIS, which is pretty cool. But all right, so if it was wildfires, then you were part of that original team that helped me test out the drone for FEMA.
Yeah, I got there a bit after you had sort of started on that project, but that was a project. Yeah, and you were working with all kinds of people just to get those things up in the air. So that was quite a feat on your part just to make that process work at all.
Yeah, it's all about that coordination piece. But like, honestly, even So I acted as pilot in command for those who don't know. So I went out there with actually Kyle, and we flew out there for a few days. But the only way like an emergency manager can be really effective is that coordination piece. And so of course we had like the FAA and air ops involved. But when I would send data back, I would send it back to you, Caitlyn, right? And Frank Changa and Stephanie. What is her name?
I'm not.
That's so bad.
Frank,
it's so terrible of me. But you guys are like kind of the dream team back there, right? I mean, so what was it like? So I'd send you this raw data, and then what would you do? What would you focus on?
So if I remember right, we took a lot of the background data from those photos, and we were able to pinpoint where they were happening, or where they were taken to, I think, understand different risk assessments in that area of here's the photos we took, here's where they're happening, and here's different assessments we need to make based on that. So just being able to integrate it with GIS and doing those risk assessments, especially when after wildfires, the second it rains, then you get mudslides. So you really have to make sure where those people are being displaced is still somewhere safe. Because once those mudslides hit, then you're in a whole new disaster.
Different ball game for sure.
If I remember right, that was a lot of what we helped with.
Yeah, so there was like multiple facets of that mission. So I think that's what you were focusing on, and then I had other people like doing the count of the damage assessments. There was a lot of lessons learned from that. But I gotta give you, I actually thanked Brock Long on here a couple weeks ago because of him I was able to get the drone, and then because of you and Stephanie, that's so bad, and Frank, and and Kyle even. You fast forward from 2017 to 2021, and now it's a SOP, standard operating procedure for FEMA to coordinate with Civil Air Patrol and Air Ops to get those same kind of drones up in the air to get damage assessment collections and start to understanding the long-term impacts of that disaster. So big shout out to you for helping out there.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, with GIS, there's so many ways that we can kind of take what everybody else has. There's so many places that GIS can step in and be of assistance. And so that was you were just one person on that disaster and one project we were helping on. So that was why it was so great to work with GIS on that disaster, because there were just so many avenues that we were taking with it.
Absolutely. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So it's fun to think about that. So let's back up then a little bit, because you were deployed from headquarters, right? And then you showed why you're part of the dream team, right? To be able to put the analytics together. But really, let's talk about how you're able to get into those situations, because out of the hundreds of GIS people, there's only 4 or 5 people working on this project. And as you noted, that was just one of several projects you've worked on. And so let's talk about the importance of analytics, and why do you think analytics is so critical for emergency management? And then we can kind of get into how you're able to get into those situations.
Yeah, I mean, definitely this is probably a similar answer to what you see a lot, but I mean, analytics can drive so many decisions and the decision making, and being able to provide raw data on here's why we need to make certain decisions and take certain actions. And that we're not just, I think that's sort of the old emergency management way of, well, it probably should be like this, and we probably should be doing this. And so to put hard numbers of no, here's the data, we don't want to be doing this anymore. We should be doing it this way or that way. I think brings light to a lot of problems that we might have thought were being solved and aren't as much. So, I mean, I think that's a huge part of analytics, is just being able to provide information and provide data that people didn't previously had, and we're just sort of going off their gut instinct of things. So that's what I like to see. I'm very much sort of that raw data person. I don't do very well with creative writing and things like that. I'm very much on numbers. Here's what it is and here's what it isn't. So I think that's where I like to come into play. Yeah, and I think just getting into that, I think I've been one place that I do, I think, take a little bit more risks is in my job. And I do, when opportunities come forward, maybe it's because I don't like to say no at all in life, but I don't like to say no. Like if it's an opportunity, even when I'm uncertain about it or not sure if I'm going to like it, just saying yes to it. I didn't know that going to California for 90 days to work on a wildfire would be a great experience or not. I didn't know what that was going to come of that, but it was offered to me, and I'm most certainly not going to say no to that. And I think that was just one area that I did analytics in. But I mean, even getting any job where I've been able to just sort of step in and be like, yeah, I'll do that, I'll take that, really gets you steps ahead to where you do want to be. Even if what you're deciding on at that moment isn't exactly what you want, it gives you the stepping stones to sort of move to where you do want to go. And that disaster was absolutely a stepping stone from me. Right when I got back from that disaster, I took a job in a different area just because of what I learned and I had gained from that. I knew I wanted to do something a little bit different. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that's, I mean, my own personal
That's great.
take on it of how to get into it, and sort of your foot in the door is, I mean, just taking the opportunities to do it. And I guess not being afraid of it.
That's huge.
Living in Sacramento for 90 days would be exactly what I wanted.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you said yes. I'm glad you were on our team, and you're welcome, because basically I changed your entire career. So you're welcome.
I would say so. Drones and all. Yes.
That's hilarious. So, yeah, that happened. We talked about that a little bit last week too, actually, with Dr. Earl Stoddard from Montgomery County, Maryland. Mm-hmm. And he's just talking about being a team player and how to coordinate and how to propel yourself in your career. And it actually came back to, I was actually thinking about this. I had a professor in my master's program at Georgetown who was like, if for the first 10 years of your career, you should go up or out every 2 years and never say no. And so I was at Georgetown. I had a great job in DC. I was happy with my job in DC. And Rodney Melsick from the national team, FEMA, I never thought I'd be working for FEMA. I kind of worked on some of the other man-made stuff, but tapped me on my shoulder and says, I want to hire you to do GIS here. And actually I did say no. And then he said no to your no. And it was like the best thing that ever happened to me, because he said no to your no. I talked to a professor at Georgetown and said, just say yes. Always say yes to a career opportunity, because you're going to gain more on your resume. You're going to look and be more complete as an emergency manager. And so I went with it. I'm like, so glad I did that. So that's excellent advice, especially for those emergency managers who are out there right now and like thinking, what do I want to do? If an opportunity presents itself, go for it. Right? That's the advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And my first real experience was taking a volunteer opportunity, because I didn't know what I was doing or what I wanted to do with emergency management. And I was living in Colorado, and the Colorado floods happened and they needed volunteers. And so I just took a volunteer position and ended up being a disaster case manager for 9 months with them. And that real true experience, getting that and working with the survivors every single day, working in their homes, working with the contractors, the full circle. And I would have never done that just taking a volunteer position. Of course, it's always important to eventually get paid, but doing that in the meantime was the best thing I could have ever done. And just taking that breath of, let's figure out what I want to do so that I can move forward. And that it worked great. And so whatever opportunities you can find, even if they're minor, that was definitely one of the best ones that's really gotten me further in emergency management, and having that sort of experience.
Awesome. Yeah, there's no such thing as a minor opportunity. It is or it isn't, and there's always outside factors. There's always reasons to say no. Family, friends, you like your lifestyle. It sounds like a lot of work. It's going to push you. And, you do have to weigh that a little bit, obviously. But as long as it's ethical, moral, and, is going to help you out in your career, you should just do it, right? Like, always go for it. So,
and I think
great advice.
I think it's funny in emergency management. I don't know that you find that like complacency as much, because emergency managers are just kind of built to sort of seek out where the problems are and where the help can be done. And so it's a little bit different than other careers where you feel a little more settled and you're like, okay, I'm okay with this. In emergency management, there's a reason you're an emergency manager. You want that, I don't want to say excitement. Disaster shouldn't be exciting, but sort of that drive and that motivation to do more, to be challenged and to help and to serve. And it's a little bit different in the emergency management world, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny way to put it. Like, it is fun and it is a thrill. Basically, I like to be able to look at complex problems. It's like I'm like an optimistic, negative realist. Problems are going to happen, but I have this like weird confidence that like I can figure it out. And okay, like give me a mountain to climb and I'm going to figure out how. And I think that's kind of what drives this industry. There's probably a lot of people listening to you right now and saying like, okay, like I totally agree with that. Like I'm wired that way. If you're wired in a way where you're able to look at a problem and say, I think I can help plug a gap. I think I can figure something out. And as an emergency manager, for example, you're perfect for this. Like you can do analytics, or you can do operations. You can do technical writing. Like there's so many different areas in that. You don't have to do all of them. I can do all of them, but I'm just kidding. But like
I'm not disagreeing.
Good. That's good. My clients agree with me too. Doberman Emergency Management, hire us. So like just finding an area where you can say, I can be effective here. I'm going to get the training. I'm going to get the experience, and I can be effective here.
Absolutely. So many arenas and also so many levels. I mean, you can work at the local level, you can work at the state level, you can work at the regional level, you can work at the federal level. So many areas where you can really find your niche in and like what you excel at and what works best for you in management or serving or working with the community. There's so many avenues in emergency management.
It's kind of like saying business, right? Like when you say, like to people in our field, it's like, well, what in business do you work on? So let's talk about your niche then, because holy cow, you've worked on some really cool projects. And like, over like the 5 years that I've known you at least. And I didn't even know about the flooding in Colorado, that experience. So that's really cool that you did that. And I know you did AmeriCorps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like, what are your top projects that you focused on?
Oh, top projects.
You've worked on so many.
Right?
So like,
I have done a lot of different ones. I think, I came from a very sciencey disaster background. My bachelor's degree is in geology. And then I ended up living in New Zealand for a while, studying volcanoes. And so I did a very science. That's what I thought I was going to do, was the science side of disasters. I think that's a little bit still where my heart is. I mean, I've loved working with the communities. I've loved being at a higher level and having oversight on so many disasters across the nation that I haven't found a pull to leave that yet. But looking back on my start and where I was in the beginning, I definitely loved the science side of things, and working with. When I was in New Zealand, we did different soil samples to see how far out volcanic ash would spread, or the basically how far out the ash would fall to help communicate to people, you're in an area that you're going to get this many inches if this large of an explosion happens, eruption. And so doing this science part of it and then being able to relay that to the community, I think is a really cool thing. And that was probably, I think when I look back at all of the disaster things I've done, really getting down to the actual disaster, I think is a really cool thing. And just goes to show a whole nother arena that you can get into in emergency management. You don't necessarily have to be the best people person, or you don't necessarily have to be a great manager. You can do these sort of sciencey, unique things that also help inform the community on what's about to happen for them. So I'd say that's probably one of my top ones, even though feels like so long ago now. But otherwise, I mean, GIS, which is also can be considered kind of sciencey and analytics, and not so much community and person based, but just the projects that I've done on the disasters with the wildfires, doing flood assessments, and then also being part of the response center and getting to see so many needs for so many different disasters. You have an earthquake, and so then you need to see, well, where are all the aftershocks happening, and how do we need to relay that to people? Or you have floods, well, how far out does the flood extend, and where can we put shelters? And so again, just taking the pieces that you do have and the information that you do have and being able to relay that, I think are the best projects that I've done, and like truly knowing that you are making a difference because you see it. You see that information getting provided, and you see people reacting to it and preparing for it. That's a pretty cool thing. So
hilariously that you say that it doesn't require those people skills, but every project you just mentioned was talking about reaching out to people and helping people.
I guess you're right. I guess I think my comfortableness is much more behind a computer and with an Excel spreadsheet. And as much as I love to see what's happening in the community, I think I just know where my strong suit is a little bit more.
Passion. Yeah.
Pass that information to someone that can best relay it to people. Because you put me in front of an audience of people, and I don't know if I'm the best person to relay that information, but to see how the information that I do gather gets put out to people, even if I'm not the one relaying it, is a great thing for me.
Emergency management is 100% improved through data analytics and the sciences. Mm-hmm. If you have a weather event and there's no science behind that, you fail, right? So. What you're talking about is something that's really that I'm passionate about. Obviously I like talking to people. I like getting in front of people, but mm-hmm. I'm kind of the same way. Like, if I can get in front of a computer and say like, okay, like this is what's actually happening, not what I think is happening, what I hear about on the news, what somebody else's opinion, but it comes down to like a constant struggle. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit, like, you have operations and even planning, but mostly operations who just like want to go, right? Go. And you have people in data who are just like, wait, let me figure this out. And there has to be some kind of balance. And so with so much experience in emergency management where it is conflicting, right? What would be your advice to those who have a traditional operations background, who don't understand the weight? And what advice would you give on the other side to those data scientists who don't understand maybe necessarily like the speed of which they need to be moving at for operations? What advice would you give to both parties there?
Yeah, I think definitely see that a lot in response. And there's a lot of pressure that comes down, which is totally understandable. I can only speak as much from the GIS perspective of analytics, but sort of having the understanding of it does take time for the information to come in. is important, that we can't have all the answers in 5 minutes. It doesn't always work like that. But, I have been on the side that I have worked with people that genuinely do take too long, and that, it's okay not to have all 10 answers. Provide the 7 that you can for now, and with the data that you have, and we can move forward as we need to and revise it. But, I think just working with what you have at the time and making sure you're emphasizing where the gaps are so it's not miscommunicated or misconstrued is really important. But I know there's always sort of nuances that we try to convey and communicate to make sure that here's the data that we have and that we can provide right now to sort of give some direction, even if we don't have the answer right now. And so I think on the other side, being able to at least be okay with a direction forward, even if we don't have the solution just yet, helps us on our end with the analytics and sort of buys us a little bit more time of, okay, if you want the answer, give us a moment to make sure it's right first. So that's tough though. You're right that it's extremely challenging to balance both those sides.
I'm applauding you right now because yes, that's the audience applauding you too. That's my answer. You just said my answer. And especially when there's that old phrase of like 80% solution is enough. Both parties need to understand that something has to be done. And if you want to do it right or you want to do it quick, sometimes that's conflicting. And that doesn't mean that either party has to wait. While they're operating, they might get ahead of GIS, and GIS, and analytics might be like, whoa, that was the wrong action, and they might get held up by that. But these guys have to act. They have to save lives. They have to do something. And the other side of it is, okay, we're going to move as fast as we can so that future actions are taken by them as they're acting. And so it's never a one or the other. It's both moving forward and trying to add that situational awareness component to that, so that they're able to make the best answer in the time frame that they have. Yeah. Great answer.
And moving in sync forward too. I mean, you have one moving forward too quickly, the other one doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing anymore. We're going in. So if you can move forward together and say, here's where we want to go next with this, then it's like, okay, let me see what I can do for you. But if you don't have any of that coordination, I mean, you've mentioned that already, and it gets brought up anytime you talk about emergency management, but without it, you really aren't making much progress.
I call myself an emergency manager. My company is called Doberman Emergency Management, but hilariously, like, as more I've talked to people like you, experts in the field, the more I've thought, okay, we really should be calling ourselves emergency coordinators. The best emergency manager is terrible if they're not able to relay information, whether it's through sharing data or through getting up on a stand or, just be able to work with different parties. There's so many different stakeholders. And, it goes back to that original thought, though, is like data and science improves emergency management. You need it because that'll make you a better emergency coordinator, right? If you're putting up shelters in a flood zone and, that's a problem. So great call out. Seriously. Man, that makes me think about so much. But you're talking about some people moving too slow. I definitely felt that. My one advice, if we're talking to GISers right now, my one advice is stop trying to make the map look pretty.
Yeah.
Everyone with enough time can change the shades and how thick the lines are. And, just if it's legible, somebody in ops is going to be looking at it for 10 seconds. And
That's
really good map.
That's part of why I'm in GIS, though, because I'm so meticulous about those things. But no, you absolutely are right. And I mean, sometimes we have to get caught up in the red tape of it has to say this and it has to have that. And at the end of the day, you're right. If they can make a decision with the line black instead of blue, then by all means, just get it to where it needs to go. Absolutely, though.
I was watching CNN, or no, I was not watching CNN. I got a text saying, watch CNN, and I turned on the TV, and the President of the United States was holding my map, my super crappy map that I made. And so like there was like part of a fear there, like, oh, that's super ugly. But at the same time, he was happy. And the FEMA, the FEMA administrator at the time was talking about what they were showing on the map. And so like I was getting all these texts like, hey, that's your map, that's awesome. I was like, but at the same time, like that's it. Like they got the information that they needed. We can go back in later and we can make it, 508 compliant. We can do all that stuff for other people, and we should. But again, those conflicting thought processes. I got in a lot of trouble with GIS at FEMA because I came from operations first. And when I made this comment at a conference, oh my gosh, I wish I could take it back now. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? I made a comment at a conference saying, GISers don't really speak the language of emergency management. And all these people in GIS are like, how dare you? GISers, have you ever seen the show IT Crowd?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh, hilarious show. They're like IT people. They get super offended by like, how dare you address. But like, I still felt like that was true. I feel like it's true today. I think we could do a lot better of understanding like the language, what they mean when they say now. Mm-hmm. And I think vice versa too. I think there needs to be a lot of training on the operations side, the incident commander side, of like when you ask for a change, what you think is one change is 40 different changes. I had to change my SQL query, whatever. So
yeah,
I think that's a good call out too for this episode. We're talking about analytics of like that cross training that needs to happen when you're not in a disaster, so that there's clear expectations from both parties, so that you can work together to help people out.
Yeah, and just a little more. I mean, we're working in such a fast-paced environment, but taking a second to be like, okay, what is it that I really need? Because I think from the response GIS side, I think it gets difficult of like, really, you really want this? What is this really showing? And then of course they come back and they're like, oh yeah, I don't need this. I meant for it to be like this. It's like, okay, if you had told me that,
I know. Oh, that was so much easier.
Yeah. So I think, just taking a second of like, okay, this is going to take some time to make, what do I really need? What do I really want? What's really going to be helpful? And that definitely helps us on our end of like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I can put all that together and it can be useful for you.
That's the quote. That's the quote of the show that I'm going to take right there. That's awesome.
I mean, it's just about, but it's what you said, just knowing what you're going to need. And so. Yeah.
Man, I was like kind of rolling my eyes here for a second because I was remembering some of these experiences. To defend GIS, because I kind of battered GIS first, so I'll back up GIS so they don't everybody in GIS hates me.
Defend it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's hilarious. I was in a tornado recovery, was not response, and I had somebody come up to me and said, hey, can you put my hotel on the map to see how close it was to the tornado track? And I was like, dude, we are 200 miles away from the tornado. Like, why am I putting your Marriott on the map? Marriott, you can sponsor our show after this because you're awesome. But yeah, so like why? He's like, oh, I thought it'd be interesting to send back to my family. I'm like, again, you're towns away, amigo. Like, I'm not doing this map for you. And so I think we should, like, understanding those clear expectations. The more GIS people coordinate and collaborate with ops stop asking for stupid requests. I cannot. Oh my gosh, going on. I'm like airing out all my frustrations here. Operations people asking for like thinking GIS is the print shop drives me nuts. I'm not your printer. I'm not a print expert. I don't care how big or small the printer is. Give that to logistics or somebody. Like I want to spend my time figuring out what the problems are, not like, oh, let me just like print off your, E-size map for you.
Yep, and you see that much more on disasters. Yeah. But I also think for operations to recognize the capabilities of analytics, so often they're like, oh, I need this on a map. And I'm like, you realize you can Google map that, right?
Oh,
like,
don't.
Look that up yourself. Like, all I'm going to do is screenshot Google and send it back to you.
I've done that so many times. It's hilarious.
And so being able to enable people of here's what you can do and here's what you can use me for. So we're both getting what we need and we're both doing it in an efficient way. Because you don't need me. You're wasting time coming to my desk and asking me to do it when you don't realize that you have the tools to do it yourself. But you also don't realize the tools I have to help you do even more advanced things than what you realize you can do.
Hey, we're at the JFO. Can you give me a map to tell me how to get to the EOC, State EOC? Do you know the address of the State EOC? Yeah? Don't you have an iPhone, man? Yeah, I use it all the time for maps and stuff, but we're in a disaster. So I'm like, dude, you are not in a disaster. Like, the survivor's in a disaster. You have connectivity. You're in the same freaking city. No, I'm not. Oh my gosh.
Or the request to plot shelters. And it's like, okay, well, do you have the latitude or longitudes or addresses? Well, no, can't you just Google those? Okay, yeah, I'll Google all 181 of them for you. No worries. That's fine. I got it.
No big deal. No. I'll just spend my time doing that. Yeah, that's hilarious.
So absolutely. Just recognizing what we're capable of as analysts and what we can and can't do. Because there are some things that are beyond us that we don't have the information for, and we would need you to give it to us for us to do anything with it. So
speak for yourself. I'm just kidding.
I'll let you look up all 181 shelters next time.
That's why we get FEMA Corps. That's why we have FEMA Corps.
Don't bash FEMA Corps.
I love FEMA Corps. They're the greatest interns ever. We're not interns. You're totally interns. Okay.
Talk about asking for prints all the time.
Okay, that's the acceptable group to ask for prints for. I came back to a disaster. I was a younger guy, and so people didn't really know who I was, and that's fine. But I got back to this disaster, and we get local hires. People, I'm nothing against age, anything. But this guy walked up to me and he handed me a piece of paper and he said, hey, I need you to make this map. And I was like, I'm sorry, who are you? And I had just come back from a rotation, and he goes, oh, I'm a GIS specialist. I'm like, I'm your boss's boss, dude. You make the map. Who are you? And then I just gave it to him before.
Especially if he's the specialist, he's supposed to be the one making them.
Whatever. Yeah, it's just kind of funny.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You do see that on disasters when it's all on new disasters, not even if you're new people, but you don't know who everybody is. And it does take a little bit to sort of understand the ranking system. So
yeah. That's a good point. How do you work that? I mean, how do you work that system out? What is your thought process? I mean, I guess I know the thought process, but in emergency management, you do work with so many different people all the time, especially GIS, who's coordinating with all these different agencies and data groups to get data. Do you have a process that you could share where it could help others out in the field to say, okay, who are my stakeholders and how do I work with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think every disaster. So, I mean, there's just new people. It's weird because it's a small world that you see the same people, but it's also every disaster you're seeing so many new people. But it's not like we wear the titles on our shirts or anything like that. I think I'm more prone to just assuming everybody is above me and to just in that manner. But still, it's if there's information that needs to be relayed to people, I don't think it should matter as much if they are 5 people above the chain from you or 2. I mean, you should follow the chain of command, but if the information needs to go somewhere, I'm not going to care as much about rank. This information needs to get to this person to take an action. And so whatever the best way to get it there, I think is important. Granted, you shouldn't just be walking into the federal coordinator officer's office, but I think there's ways
I've done that so many times. It's so funny. But
I would not do that.
Yeah.
But you have the personality that you can do that.
I've been so close to being fired so many times. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. I haven't been on this like disasters in the same way that you do. I just kind of step in for a little bit and step out. So
and yeah, you're effective. You're extremely effective, and it just shows everybody has a different role. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like doing your role is important. I think it's hard when you're there's just I think it's just important to do the job that you have, and to like take pride in it. And if you're not doing that, then you should probably find a different job. But I think the people that are most frustrating to work with in any job, any position, any role is like the people that don't feel compelled to do their job. Then it's like, well, I like my job and I want to be here and I want to make a difference. And if you don't, then it can be frustrating in that sense.
I was on another wildfire actually, and I was asked to go and support the region that was at that wildfire. And maybe I'm giving too much away, but their team was fairly afraid of their FCO. The FCO was very political. He was high ranking and he had a lot of friends. And so like it was very like top down organization. And so I got out there, I was not on their team, and it happened 4 times over the course of 2 days, which is way too long in a disaster anyways. But hey, here's the request from the FCO. Great. Here's what they're looking for. Hand it back. 4 times. No, it's not what he wants. No, it's not what he wants. No, it's not what he wants. He thinks this sucks. And I'm like, well, I don't suck. So I just got tired of it. I was like, I don't work for this team. And so I went up to him and I said, hey, I'm the guy that's been trying to make your stupid map. What do you want? And he's like, this is what I want. ... I said, fine. Came back 15 minutes later. I said, this is what you really want. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Thanks. And it was like,
and that's where I think rank just shouldn't, like, if it needs to get done, then I don't think it's as long as information and the decision needs to be made, then. Yeah.
And it was a great career move for me because, honestly, like, one, I had to be competent in what I was doing. And it also helped that I was on a national team and working with a regional team. I think that separated that a little bit too.
Yeah.
So there are those caveats, but the next day when he came into the room to address everybody, he didn't talk to anybody else. He talked to me, said some joke, and I laughed at it. It was kind of a funny joke. And then the next day, his assistant came up to me and said, hey, we're going to do a tour of the disaster with the FEMA administrator who's coming out here. Do you want to go and look at the disaster with us? And so like it became like this awesome opportunity where I'm always behind a computer, and now I get to be out in the field with some people who are thinking about this in a pretty complex way. And I was like, that is why it's getting the job done is most important. It's good for your career. It's good for the survivor. It's good for everybody. You have to be fairly smart of how you navigate that. But before I go any further, though, I'm 100% convinced that you could go up to an FCO. You could go up to you go to the president of the United States and just tell them what's up. And they probably listen to you. No way. You're too good at your job. Like you talk about like you're not a people person. You talk about like all these other stuff, but you're on here. You're giving great advice, and from personal experience, I know you do phenomenal work. So,
thank you.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good way to end the show. I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of those nuggets of information. Definitely data backed, because I can back that up. So you have 2 points of data there. But if we're going to close here, what would be your advice to emergency managers of the future? If you were going to change one thing about emergency management, what would you change?
For the future, I think there's a lot of times, I think emergency management, when disasters happen, there's so much opportunity for innovation, and these grand ideas come about when you're placed in these situations of like, you don't know what to do next. And you start figuring out these solutions, and ideas just start rolling from everybody around. And I think that's one of the neatest things to see on a disaster, is to see the solutions, to see the recovery, to see the impact. What I wish I could see more of is that innovation from disaster to disaster. I mean, you talked about your drones and how you see that more, and how now it's a standard operating procedure, and that's amazing and that's great. And I don't think we see that enough. You know, it started on one disaster and now they're working to apply it on every disaster. I think that's rare. And there's so many great ideas that come into play on disasters. And yes, every disaster is different, but I think in this same way, something like drones, I mean, that can be beneficial on any disaster in different ways, because every disaster is different, but it could still be helpful. And so just having those ideas and then like taking the risks like you do and making it work. I remember how hard you pushed for those drones, and I don't think there's as many people that would push that hard. It'd be like, oh, yep, FAA said no. And you were like, no, there's no reason for them to say no. We need this and it should get done. And so seeing those ideas being pushed and then seeing them spread, I wish I could see more of. But so that's what I would like for the
I
future.
appreciate that.
Emergency management and disasters. But that's just my personal side.
You know, in emergency management, I think like most fields, and that's great advice. A great thought process. Obviously, I like innovation. But it always feels like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Man, GIS, I feel, is going to hate me after this call. But like Civil Air Patrol, I have nothing against Civil Air Patrol. I think it's phenomenal that they get these pilots out there who are willing to go out to disasters and volunteer their time. Like huge, like, you know, hey, thanks. Mm-hmm. At the same time, from a GIS perspective, the reason why the Cessna flights were pretty low on my totem pole for like effectiveness is because we'd give them point A to point B to fly, and these pilots who would attach the camera to the plane would take 500,000 photos, and we'd go through that one by one. It'd take forever, take months, and even with mosaics. And then so I said, hey, a drone with a GIS trained person will be more effective than this. And so what did they do?
And cheaper.
They're like, yeah, they say, hey, let's get Civil Air Patrol to start flying drones, these amateurs who are not GIS people. And again, they're collecting 500,000 photos, but now it's like beautiful pictures of the sunset behind this destruction. And you're like, you're doing the same thing, but with a different aircraft. Like the whole idea was to like be able to target really specific areas, specifically for the IMATs who are supposed to operate in austere conditions, not for headquarters people. Again, they're going to all hate me, but whatever. I think they already do, so it's all good. Like, if you want a really great situational awareness, you need innovation. And we have so much opportunity to use data to back up that information so much faster. Oh my gosh. You're like my favorite person in the world right now, because you're saying all the things I believe.
Drones are definitely cheaper, but it's like, you don't even need like to spend the time those are great and everything, but just like even the everyday solutions that people come up with to be able to help the communities recover and themselves recover, like whether that's technology or not. Drones are such a large scale solution, I feel like, but there are just so many everyday things that you see come out of disasters, and you're like, wow, I would have never thought about that, but look what it's done for the community now, and they're moving forward, and that's amazing. Just when I was in New Zealand after the Christchurch earthquake, and they used all their shipping containers to recreate all their storefronts, because obviously it was going to take to rebuild all that. That's amazing. There's not really technology involved in that. Those are just everyday things that they're like, here's what we can do instead. And that's really cool to me. So,
man, gosh, I want to talk to you forever about this. My last point to agree with you again, because, you know, you're saying the things that I want to say in such a nicer way. I'm like the, what is that skit? Angry Obama. I'm like the angry Obama, and you're like the nice Obama. You know what I'm talking about? The Key and Peele skit. Gosh.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's in the Nepal earthquake. All the buildings that were made out of concrete, it's just specifically these homes, were just destroyed. But the homes that were actually older in the more vulnerable communities that were made out of bamboo and clay, they stayed because they could sway with the earth.
Yeah.
And so there was groups that went in there and said, let's make an innovative way to be able to use bamboo and clay. One, it's cheaper and easier, but two, we know it can deal with earthquakes and aftershocks. And so there was actually groups that went in there, instead of using 2x4s and concrete, they used the local resources. And I just thought that was phenomenal. Sometimes the innovation doesn't need to be new. It just needs to be like, again, using data. Yeah. Creative. Yeah. Oh gosh. You're coming back on the show for sure. We're going to be talking about these ideas. I'll be angry Obama, and you can be nice Obama, President Obama. Gosh, so
deal.
Key and Peele, Disaster Tough. Okay. Caitlyn, thanks again so much for coming on the show. Everybody, yeah, absolutely. Everybody, if you liked this episode, if you liked nice President Obama, Caitlyn Von Stein, everything that she had to say, please give us that 5-star rating. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you tune in to our Instagram page, which is our major page for all this show, where we'll be posting more about what Caitlyn has to offer. She is so phenomenal in emergency management. Obviously, she has great advice. If you want to ask her questions or do a follow-up there, that'd be great. You can also send us an email at info@dobermanemg.com. Again, that's info@dobermanemg.com.